Hello and welcome to History Cupboard, a show in which we delve into the dustier corners of the past and discover interesting people and strange facts from history. I'm Angus Donald, a historical novelist, and today I'm going to be talking to you about one of the most famous outlaws of all time in a show called 10 Things You Probably Didn't Know About Robin Hood. I'm going to start with, just get off with number one. The very first mention of Robin Hood was in the Pipe Rolls, which were legal records from the York Assizes in the year 1226 to 1227. So the beginning of the 13th century. There's a character called Rob Hod, who is recorded in the rolls as having possessions of 32 shillings and 16 pence confiscated, and then he ran away and became a fugitive, so an outlaw. And he's mentioned again next year, 27, 28, as Hob Hood, still an outlaw. So this is probably the most likely person to be Robin Hood. Between 1261 and 1300, there are at least 8 malefactors called Robin Hood listed in the Pipe Rolls. Probably not this guy, who may have been dead by that point. And it seems that after the middle of the 13th century, all sorts of criminals called themselves Robin Hood when they were brought up before judges and magistrates and all that sort of thing. It seemed that it was a kind of a badge of glamour. They wanted to borrow some of Robin Hood's glamour, so they pretended to be him and were recorded as such in the rolls, which means that the legendary stories about the hero were circulating from about 1250 onwards, being sung in the alehouses and so on. The name Robin Hood, apart from being appropriated by other criminals, may also have been a sort of pseudonym, because the Robin, for a start, Robin is a diminutive of Robert. Robert was a very common name after the Norman conquest. I mean, something like 1 in 8 people were called Robert. And the diminutive, the diminutive is Robin. If you pronounce Robert in a French accent, it's Robert. And Hood and wood in some dialects in English are actually homonyms, so they sound the same. Hood, wood. So Robert Hood could be robber of the woods, another name for an outlaw. So it could just be a generic name. Summertime. Yes, being an outlaw may have been a seasonal activity. Because in all of the ballads, it's either spring or summer, and this makes a kind of sense because you can hide in the forest, in the woodlands, when the foliage is out. In winter, and it's bare sticks and skeletal trees, you can't really hide all that well. So also, if you were going to sleep outside and sleep rough, you could do that in spring and summer. Not so feasible in freezing December. So it seems that outlaws may have plied their trade in the spring and summer and autumn perhaps, and then gone to see relatives or friends or other criminals during the freezing months of the year. Was Robin Hood from Nottinghamshire or Yorkshire? I think it's a moot point because they're very close together. Sherwood Forest was huge. It was 100,000 acres in the early Middle Ages. And the northern tip of Sherwood is only 30 miles from Barnsley-Dale, where Robin Hood famously stood. So that's a day's ride, easy. King Richard the Lionheart chased a deer when he was hunting in the forest from Sherwood to Barnsley-Dale in a day's hunting. So basically he could easily have gone between Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire and plied his trade in both of those places. Actually, Robin Hood may have been from Kent. Now, I know you're going to say, you're from Kent, Angus, and I'm going to say, yes, I am. But there's a legend that Robin Hood came from a place about 10 miles down that way, near Wadhurst. And there was a character in the 13th century called Willikin of the Weald. The Weald of Kent is a famously wooded area. And he led a band of archers. He was a famous archer. He led a band of archers who would jump out and ambush the invading French in 1216, 1217. And it's possible, I like to believe it, that Robin Hood came from Kent and that he's modelled on this guy, Willikin of the Weald. You may not agree with me. Robin Hood was not a peasant. He wasn't working class at all, as most people seem to think he was. He was actually a yeoman, which means a small landowner, along with sort of armiger and a squire. It's a sort of middle-ranking person, not a nobleman, not a peasant. He was middle class. So it was the Victorians who invented the Saxons versus the Normans, that dichotomy, and also the sort of peasants versus aristocracy, which has continued to this day. But actually, originally, he's a yeoman. Robin Hood actually supports the status quo. He's not a revolutionary. In the early ballads, he's anti-corruption. In no sense does he want to change the social order, which has been ordained by God. He's religious. He's very fond of the Virgin Mary. And he's not against the Christian church, just against greedy and corrupt churchmen. Those are his targets. Maid Marian, his love, she came late to the story. She comes in the 15th century, and she may have been black. Marian is possibly a corruption of Murian, which means the Moorish one, and she appears in the sort of May Day revels as a kind of pantomime dame figure, a bit like Widow Twankey, and is associated with Friar Tuck, and they were a sort of comedy double act. She's not Robin Hood's love. That comes a bit later, and she sort of is grafted into the story as his girlfriend or his lover. There was no Sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood's time, sadly. The office of Sheriff of the town of Nottingham was created in the 15th century in 1449. The royal official in charge of tax collection and as well as oppressing the peasants and obviously cancelling Christmas was the Sheriff of Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and the Royal Forests. So there was no Sheriff of Nottingham. You may wonder where I've gathered all these facts from. I've been writing about Robin Hood for a very long time. This book here, Outlaw, is the first in the successful Outlaw Chronicles series, which is now, 8 were published traditionally, and another 2, these 2 here, Robin Hood and the Castle of Bones, and Robin Hood and the Caliph's Gold, were self-published by me, and I'm writing number 11 at the moment, which will be out in the spring of 2025. So that's all I've got for you today. Like and subscribe. I hope you will join me again on the History Cupboard. Tell all your friends.